Welcome. You're listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorilee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network and anywhere you get your podcasts. Today's episode is one that will stay with you long after you listen. It's about the love that refuses to disappear even in the shadow of unthinkable pain. When her 4-year-old son was diagnosed with cancer, my guest, Amber Sweet Davis's world fractured beyond recognition. Out of that darkness, she wrote a book that is not about tidy hope or polished strength, but about what it truly means to be a mother in the unthinkable. Her book is called Please Don't Die. Amber, thank you so much. I don't know. I'm going to cry just reading that.
I know.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I have some tissue ready, so
oh, good.
Might be a wet one today.
I'm clearly not prepared.
Oh.
But your book opens up in the prologue, and yes, I did. I teared up, and I was like, okay, I need to take a break. It kind of opened up of who you were, and kind of where you are now in the present with your son. Can you share your story and what it was like when things changed?
Yeah, things seemingly escalated very quickly. He started with a very strange limp at school. I was a teacher at his preschool and very close with all of his teachers, obviously. And there was a couple weeks that they just started flagging unusual behavior. He was a very bright, energetic, outgoing child. When we used to live at our apartment complex, he was basically famous at the pool because he would go up to everybody and strike conversations with adults and be able to carry a conversation at 3 years old. And he loved to perform for people. He just was such a magnetic energy. And I started to see a shift, but it was very, very subtle. And it was mostly physical. He had like this weird limp, and he was complaining of leg and hip pain. And then I started to get really nervous when, I thought it was growth. It was a growth spurt because he is very tall for his age. And he had recently shot up, and we had to change his shoes. And I thought, well, maybe it's the shoes, or, you just explain things away because you never imagine what it ended up being. But it was when his personality started to shift. The physical stuff I could kind of, explain away, like I said, but when his teachers were like, he just seems sad. He's not a sad kid, or he's asking for you a lot, which I had been teaching at his school for 2 years. It wasn't strange for him to see me on the playground or see me at school. And it was very business as usual until these 2 very weird weeks. We took him to the emergency room because he started waking up with night sweats, soaking wet. And that had never been something that we had navigated before. So we took him to the emergency room, and they did labs. They did an ultrasound and of his hip area, because that's where we told them the pain was stemming from. They did an x-ray. Everything came back normal.
Oh, gosh.
They diagnosed him with transient synovitis, which they said was really common post-viral. And that was very strange to me because he was not sick. And so that was my first big red flag. But they were sure of it, that that's what it was, that it typically manifests in hip pain and joint pain and fluid. He had some fluid in his hips. That was kind of the only alarm bell that was rang by them at the time. And so we went home. They were like, rest ibuprofen. And not only did it not get better, but it got progressively worse. He could not walk.
Oh,
When we picked him up to put him in the car seat, normally he would just get in the car seat by himself. He needed help in ways he'd never needed before physically. And then one day we picked him up to put him in the car seat, and he screamed in pain. And I just knew something was wrong. So I called the doctor, and they referred us to an orthopedic specialist, which was an interesting lane to go down. But, you trust doctors, and they're the experts, right? So we made an appointment for the day after Easter, and the day before Easter, he spent 15 hours in bed, refused to get out of bed, aside from going to the bathroom maybe once, didn't want to eat anything, was just not my son at all. We woke up for Easter and he was excited to go egg hunting, but that limp was very present. And I just knew something was wrong. So we went to the orthopedic specialist the next day, and they weighed him, and he had lost 2 pounds in 2 weeks because we were at the ER 2 weeks prior.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor asked about it, and I was like, he's a bit picky, and he was pickier in the last couple of weeks, but he's been eating. And so she was like, 2 pounds is not normal in 2 weeks. And then she asked about the night sweats, and I just remember her face changing. And she got on my level and she said, "Mom to mom, go to the ER now." She said, "This is not transient synovitis. I don't know what it is." I think she did know, and she couldn't tell me. She said, "I'm going to call them and say that it's septic arthritis, because if it's septic, you'll get seen right away." She's like, "I can't diagnose you. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to give you that diagnosis now to get you in the door." She said, "Do not go home. Do not go get a bag. Go right now." And that was the moment that the ground just completely fell out from underneath me.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was wrong. And they didn't send us home, which was the first sign that something was really wrong. The 5 days that we were there prior to diagnosis, they thought he had juvenile arthritis. And so, the team from rheumatology kept coming in and convincing us that that's what it was. And my best friend Samantha was there alongside my husband, and she kept saying, "We need to rule out oncology because some of his labs, they're not saying cancer, but they're nodding to it." We were thinking leukemia at the time, and the doctors kept telling us, oncology's not, what do they say? They don't think his case is remarkable, or they don't think his story is remarkable. They don't think it's oncology. We kept asking and asking for 5 days straight, and finally they did an MRI out of an abundance of caution, they said, and they found the tumor. He had a mass in his chest and a tumor the size of a walnut in his abdomen wrapped around his adrenal gland. And they brought us into the room and told us it was neuroblastoma, which I had never heard that word before. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it meant that our life was over, effective immediately. I write a lot about it in detail in my book, just about how, suspended from yourself you are in that moment. And luckily Samantha was there taking notes, because Michael and I were just ghosts. Like I heard words, but I didn't retain a thing. They told us at the time, he's high risk because typically children are diagnosed within the first 18 months of life. So the later you get, the more high risk it becomes. And because he was 4, and that's typically around the time when they stop making the particular gene, I think it's around 10. So anything under 10 is considered, anything between 4 and 10 is considered high risk. And at the time they gave him 50-50. And then there were, many tools in the tool belt that will increase that rate to, they try to increase it as high as 80, but that's as high as they give you for this particular cancer. It's a very sneaky, smart cancer. And one of the scariest things is after children have beat it and rang the bell, and they relapse, the likelihood of them beating it is very low, because the cancer learns everything that you did, and it knows now all of your tricks. And so it knows how to hide, and it knows how to fight against all of the tools in your tool belt, because it's learned for the treatment plan is anywhere between 18 months and 2 years. So for 2 years, the cancer is learning everything that you have up your sleeve. So that's obviously terrifying, and not, I don't want to put that into the world for our story at all. He is responding beautifully to treatments.
Mm.
His tumor is now the size of a pea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they give you a Curie score. It's called a Curie score upon diagnosis with all of the disease evaluation, and it's from 0 to 30. And he was 26 when he was diagnosed, and now he's 4.
Oh my gosh.
So we see a lot of positives and there's a lot of hope there because he is responding so well. But I mean, it's been 6 months and it's been the hardest 6 months of my life.
And so how long is this treatment? You said like up to 2 years?
Yeah, we're 6 months in and it's a 2-year treatment plan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But did they it shrinking down to the size of a pea, is that something that they expected or
Yes
did
and no. They were hopeful, obviously, but he's in this study. He's in a clinical study for neuroblastoma.
oh good.
So they're seeing a different response in his case. Typically, they do surgery around after cycle 4, before cycle 5 of chemo, and they skipped it for Parker because originally it was too risky to go in because it was wrapped around the adrenal gland. After they did a second disease evaluation after 4 rounds of chemo, they discovered that it was no longer wrapped around the adrenal gland, but it had pushed further back into his body. So the surgeon decided that it was too risky. He would do more harm than good to go in. But the study that Parker's in, he's receiving immunotherapy in conjunction with chemo. Typically, the immunotherapy treatments are done at the end, like the last phase 4 of the treatment plan. And he's been getting it since cycle 2 of chemo from the beginning of
Mhm.
treatment. So they're hopeful that that changes things in a positive, but it's still a clinical study and every kid is different. So I think they have high expectations, but our oncologist, her name is Dr. Bagatelle, and she's incredible. She's kind of infamous in CHOP Philly. Um, she is very honest and sometimes a little too honest. And so she never gives us any false hope, which we really appreciate.
Yeah.
But after this last disease evaluation, when we received all that great news about the tumor shrinking and the Curie score, she said she's very hopeful for the next disease evaluation that we have in November. And she's never said the word hopeful before. So we cling to those things for sure. But yeah, there's still so much to do for
Wow.
him.
Well, that is good news. Um, and 6 months, I didn't realize it's just been 6 months, and you wrote
It
this
feels like
book.
a year, but yeah.
It feels like here. Well, you wrote this book, and so I'm assuming you wrote it within the 6 months or even less. How did you do why did you do it, and how did you have the strength to do it?
Um, I'm an actress and an artist, and I've written before over the course of my career, and it was always, screenplays, and I wrote articles for an online magazine that was industry related, or I wrote a short film and a pilot, and so writing is just my way to express.
Mm,
And sitting in the hospital room with Parker, sleep was non-existent for many reasons. It's impossible to sleep in a hospital. It's so noisy, and they come in when he's on the immunotherapy. They have to do vitals every 15 minutes for the first hour, and then every hour for 10 hours. And I'm in the bed with Parker, so I don't sleep.
ugh,
So in those quiet moments in the middle of the night, I just started doing notes on my phone of thoughts I was having, things I didn't feel safe to say out loud. Doctors make mistakes, and there have been many moments when we felt like we were let down by the medical community and by the hospital. And we're huge advocates for Parker and very vocal about his care, but there are certain things that I can't and shouldn't say out loud. But
mhm,
in speaking to other parents in the hospital, I knew that it wasn't a unique situation, and that other parents had the same feelings and thoughts. And it started as poems and reminders for conversations to have with the doctors. And I lost my mom when I was 4, and Parker was diagnosed at 4, and that
Mm.
unearthed a ton of quiet trauma that I had, or trauma that I had quieted for a long time, that reared its ugly head. And just things started to pour out of me. And when people would ask how I was doing, I didn't have the words. And so I would just start sending them the poems or the book when I started to piece it together. And
Mm.
it allowed people close to me to really get an accurate snapshot of what it's like to mother through something like this, because you can't explain it to somebody who's never been through it. And it became my voice.
Mm. Yeah, as I was telling you before we started the conversation, um, I remember looking through your Instagram, just looking at your list, watching your story, and I just remember thinking, oh, how can someone? This is so unimaginable. Like, how can someone, muster the strength to pull through this? And I think I told you that within that week, my daughter actually had to go to the ER, and we did get tested. Oncology looked at her, they ruled out leukemia. Then they were like, maybe it's rheumatoid arthritis. It was all of these things.
Wow.
And I didn't have the strength. I didn't. Luckily, my husband did. Um, I, we have a son also. So my husband, he had to stay. I stayed one night and it was really hard. And I was making my daughter anxious. So my energy was just not the energy my daughter needed. So my husband kind of stepped up and he stayed every night in the hospital. We were there for 6 days, or 6 nights. And I just remember I was just like, okay, well, I'll be here with Liam and taking care of him. And I thought he had it, he was, like, holding it together, he was telling jokes when we would visit, like, he seemed very much okay.
Mhm.
Um, but once she was out of the hospital and even, you could see that it weared on him a lot,
Mhm.
and he would have these outbursts. My husband doesn't yell ever, ever. And I don't. I'm the yeller in the family. He's the calming presence. Reasons why he stayed at the hospital. But I just, my son plays hockey, and there was a point where my son, as a kid, was just like horse collaring him, taking him down. Just it wasn't even part of the hockey game. It was more like, I'm just going to hurt everyone here.
Yeah.
And my husband, I wasn't there. Apparently, my husband had lashed out on the parent of the son who was taking, and and he told me, he was like, I was yelling, I didn't know what came over me, kind of situation. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, okay, like yelling, like you kind of got an attitude with him. But then I talked to another parent the next time I took my son. He's like, I've never seen Jared like that before. And then, my husband went to therapy, and apparently it was the rage and all of the emotions just coming out.
Yeah.
It was just really hard. So, like, for you and your husband, how are you guys? I mean, you're still in the thick of it. How are you
Yeah.
guys managing it together?
It's not easy. I have a whole chapter about it in the book, just about how grief doesn't move in sync, and how so much resentment uh, surfaces because, he's strong when I'm like, how can you be so strong in this moment? Or he crumbles and falls apart and, disassociates. And when I need him to be strong, and it's deeply affected our marriage. And Parker, so when we're at the hospital, I sleep in the bed with Parker, and Michael has to sleep on one of those roll-out cots that are more spring than mattress, or one of the chairs that they pretend you are allowed to sleep in. So I'm like a little apostrophe in Parker's bed because they're so small, and Michael's, like sleeping on springs. And then when we come home, we bought a big king bed because Parker has to have an overnight feed every night. He has a feeding tube in his stomach. And like right now, one of the medications post chemo, it's every 3 hours, even overnight. So there's just no way for Parker to be not right next to us. And he sleeps in the middle of us. And, it affects our intimacy. It affects our connection. It also, I don't know how this is going to sound, but it overshadows everything. It's the only thing we think about all day long. It's the thing we try not to think about all day long. We get 2 to 3 weeks home in between treatments, and then we're in the hospital anywhere between 5 and 7 days. And we do our best to pretend like it's normal, but he's bald and he has a feeding tube, and every time we go to the hospital, he has a port in his chest and they have to access it with an IV, and we have to hold him down for an injection every day at home. It's overtaken our life, and we do our best. Michael's mom is incredible. I really lucked out with my mother-in-law. She lives in Long Island, and she drives twice a week to come just play with Parker so that Michael and I can run an errand or go get a drink together. And I've discovered like we just sit there in silence, and like all we talk about is him, and we try to, be in the moment, but this is our life for the next 2 years. I think we've both just silently accepted that we do our best to stay connected and to address the elephant in the room when it feels like we've drifted too far apart. But at the end of the day, like, our marriage has to kind of take a back seat because Parker is the priority and saving his life is the priority,
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Your honesty. Just your honesty and your vulnerability, and also in the pages of your book, there is no forced optimism or pretending, which I appreciate.
Well, you know what? My real goal was to, and I had a lot of delusions about how much money we have because we don't have much. Michael and I are both on a leave of absence from work, and he was recently approved to be on a partial leave, but we had months with no income. And oh my God, we had friends start a GoFundMe for us, and we've been living off the GoFundMe, and it's been the only way that we can pay our mortgage. So that's been incredible. But my fantasy when I first decided to make this a book was to print a ton of copies and put it in the hospitals all around the children's hospitals all around the country and send it to cancer organizations. And I've done that on a very small scale, but it's everything's out of pocket. But I knew that if I lied in the book or if I softened it, that the parents in the trenches would know, and I would be doing them such a huge disservice, and it would feel like a betrayal of the truth because it's even the title. I have so many people flinch, and the truth is that I have screamed, I have whispered. We live that every day. We were given 50-50 when he was first diagnosed, and that's not a great those aren't great odds. And the truth is ugly, but it's the truth. And I couldn't lie. I knew that the parents reading it would feel betrayed. And this is for them as much as it is for me.
Yeah. Well, your authenticity does shine through and now. But with all of that, how do you find moments of connection or even beauty in such a difficult place?
It's hard. I really envy people who have religion because I do not. And I don't want to demonize anybody's beliefs. I don't believe, and this this experience, I lost my mom very tragically when I was 4, and my dad remarried pretty quickly to a really terrible woman.
Mm.
I would joke about it growing up that I was a real life Cinderella, but it's actually not that funny if you really think about it. So I stopped believing a long time ago. I just I find it really, I'll say, interesting. We've had so many people offer their prayers, and I accept prayer and energy and good thoughts and all of that. But I just think it's really interesting that there have been people that have given credit to prayer and God for Parker's, for the positives and for him responding to treatment. And I give that to science, and I give it to
Yeah.
research, and I give it to the doctors, and I give it to us busting our ass every day to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to advocate for him, advocate for him. I mean, there have been moments when I have told the doctors they are wrong. There have been moments when I didn't have the words and the doctor swooped in, or a nurse comes in and makes Parker's day. And we've had many great experiences. But at the end of the day, I don't credit God or prayer. I credit our hard work and Parker's, I hate this word, but his resilience and his strength, and the doctors and the medicine. And that is what is pulling us through this. And for me, strength and beauty, that all comes from my village. It very much reminds me of the newborn phase, when you're deep in the trenches and it's ugly, and you're, you know, you're so sleep deprived, and the people that come out of the woodwork to be there for you in those moments, like, that is your village. And we've really had people show up for us, not just a GoFundMe donation, but people sending food. We moved to our new house 2 days before we went to the emergency room, so we slept there for 2 days before diagnosis. And when we came home, our packages were taken and kept for us to be safe. Our trash cans were taken out. Our lawn was mowed.
Oh, wow.
Our friends went to our house to unpack our stuff. Just things that I would do for somebody else if the situation were reversed. But it was just that's the beauty, is the people who continue to show up for us 6 months in. I've sold 109 copies of the book, people supporting our journey and buying the book and reviewing it and posting about it. And I think it's the people who aren't afraid to sit in the dark with us and don't shy away from the hard. I think I appreciate that the most, because I know it's ugly, and I know it's hard to look at, and I don't want to force anybody to read the book, but I also think it gives you a really good idea of what the experience is like. And I don't think anybody should turn a blind eye. I don't think you should turn away from it. I think you should listen and sit in the dark with us.
Yeah. Well, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. You write, um, survival is not an ending. It's every breath, every choice, every moment of refusing to let go. How do you define survival now as you're living through this?
It's Parker. It's looking at my little boy and seeing how he's handled it all, and how he's changed me as a mother because of it, and how close we are now. And I mean, it wouldn't have taken this for our relationship to be this strong, but the bond is, it's unlike anything. It's the three of us against the world, and we have our village and we have everybody, but at the end of the day, we all wake up together and go to sleep together. And even if it's just pushing the medicine in his G tube, or taking him to his doctor's appointment. I mean, we're in this together. Every choice, every scan, everything. And he's a part of it as much as Michael and I are. We've never lied to him. We tell him the truth, and he wants to know the truth. He's very smart.
Mm-hmm.
He has so much agency over his body. He says things like, they take my blood because my blood has answers. Or he goes up to perfect strangers and says, I have cancer, but the chemo is taking away my sick. I'm kicking cancer's butt. I have a tube in my belly. Like he wears it like a badge of honor in a way that I never imagined. And he removes the ego. He softens the rage because he's just handling it so beautifully. And survival for me is just doing everything I can to be the best mom for him and the best advocate and the best supporter, and to remain this strong team of 3 for him.
Amber, thank you so much for your vulnerability and your truth, and really giving other parents and survivors permission to feel it all, not just the strength, but the fear and the grief. Is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything that you think parents should really know and understand about your story?
Um, I think grief is universal. And this book isn't just about cancer, it's about motherhood in every facet, and trauma. And I have so many friends who have dealt with miscarriages, or death of a loved one, or a scary illness, like your daughter. Like, I mean, grief, it looks different to everybody, but it is something everybody experiences at some point in their life. And I think at the core, we just don't want to feel alone. And I hope that my book allows for anybody who's experienced grief, whether you're on the other side of it or you're in it actively like we are, that it makes you feel seen. And that if you're sitting in the dark, I hope the book kind of feels like I'm sitting there next to you, holding your hand, and not trying to fix it, and not trying to explain it away or make excuses or make it pretty at all, but just sitting there with you and allowing the space to, like you said, feel everything.
Wow. Thank you so much, Amber. I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. That was Amber Sweet Davis, author of Please Don't Die. Please, please, please buy the book, purchase the book. To purchase her book, we're going to put it in the link in the show notes. You could also watch this episode on YouTube, and I'll make sure that link is everywhere. Don't forget, you can visit traumasurvivorthriver.com to listen to past episodes and access the latest issue of Authentic Insider magazine, where you'll find powerful stories from survivors and thrivers. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Take care.